So I've been asked to speak about something I speak about regularly, which is about being an employer of choice. And I am fortunate in my job to be able to work across all sectors. So I see a lot of best practice, and I also unfortunately see a lot of employment being done very poorly. So what I want to speak about over this series of talks is really about building up that possibility to be the employer of choice. And it's critical, just to explain that today I will be, in my talk, I'm going to assume that you have a lot of technical skill set in the background, and the management I'm going to speak about is going to be the management of people. So I won't be delving into any cows or any technical aspect like that, but I will be referring to them to help you understand the concepts that I'm discussing. So I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey, and hopefully at the end of every session you'll walk away with something that you can apply immediately. I would be absolutely delighted if between sessions, if you want to come back with some feedback, if you tried something, if it worked, it didn't work, that would be absolutely brilliant. So without any fuss here, we'll get straight onto the presentation. And Bernie, I hope will keep me to time. There's quite a bit of information here. As we're saying, it's recorded, so it is probably something you'll need to go back over and think about, because I'm going to send quite a bit of information your way. So the first, just today, what we're really going to look at, if my computer will move my screen. It's decided it wouldn't. One moment, please. There. So we're going to look at changing roles, and that's a really big one. Now, if you come away from this talk and decide to yourself, I'm going to really reflect on that aspect of my role within the business and of the role of everybody in the business, that is a huge step forward in managing your people more effectively. So we're looking at this idea of developing management, and that's really about understanding roles. Then we're going to look at management skills, and they're going to be about personal skills and interpersonal skills. So, excuse me, I'm going to just go through this. I really want to spend a bit of time on this slide, because this is really, really important. If you can get your head around these concepts, that's going to really give you a good foundation for becoming that employer of choice. And this is something that is really quite controllable. So there are many things in farming, in life, that aren't controllable, but there are many aspects of being an employer that are very controllable, but that people tend to overlook a little bit, and so don't give themselves the best opportunity when they're starting off. So let's have a look at this triangle. This triangle is quite a simple concept, but it's quite to look at, but it's actually quite important in terms of your own business. So when we start off, and yourselves, this might look a little bit corporate to you. It isn't corporate. It applies to all businesses. It applies to you as an individual. So if you reflect on your life in farming, you will have started out very task focused. So you're milking cows, you're doing. And as your role changes, and that can be a function of time or a function of your skill set, or the opportunity to move into a different position, your skill and your focus has to change. And what we see here is we move away from task, which is operational, the doing every day, and we move towards this central stage here, which is about management. Now, as we move towards management, our focus changes towards people. So we start off doing, and as we move through the business, we are going to facilitate other people to do the doing. And with that, you've got to think about it, it's an opportunity cost. If I'm going to change my role, then I have to let go of something. Now, what typically happens in my experience in all businesses, but particularly farming, because that skill set is so well ingrained, it's quite difficult to let go of that. So it's quite difficult to change my focus and say, I'm no longer doing, I'm no longer working outside, I'm no longer milking the cows. And you need to really think about when you want to develop somebody into a management position, that you need to allow them to do their job. Now, the best way to allow somebody to do their job is to let them do their job. And that's by you having the discipline not to get stuck in at something you may be far better at and can do in far less time. You have to resist the urge and to maintain where you are in that triangle. So that's very easily done when there isn't pressure on. But of course, we revert to what's normal under pressure, and you'll go straight back to doing what you're very good at, which is all the doing that you've been doing over so many years. So we need to think about, in terms of your business, who are you trying to develop? And what skill set do they need to move into this role? And then from there, you're going to create the opportunity to move up into this role, which is that very visionary concept of being the business owner, a multi-unit operator, for example. So you can see here, this is the first line employee. This is you when you started your business. We're moving here to middle management, which is a bit about technical, but a lot about people. And then up here is really about facilitating everybody in your business to work in the business, but also developing your business so that it has a future. So what we see is a movement away from doing, then we start engaging other people to do the doing, and then ultimately we want to be in a position that our system is running so well that we have an opportunity to develop it further. And that's a very difficult thing to let go of, because one of the reasons we want to keep doing what we're good at is because we're good at it. And we need to have a very good, we need to have self-discipline not to step in. The day you step in and interfere or kind of, I'll give it to me, I'll do it, you very much undermine the person that you're trying to develop. When you want to bring somebody into a new role, so if you wanted to move somebody, excuse me, I'll just go back up. If you wanted to move somebody up, or you want to move up, so this is also about succession, it's about progression. If you want to move somebody up into a new position, you have to create a vacuum. So if somebody is absolutely reliable down here, it's very difficult to move them up to here because the system could collapse without them. So you need to create the opportunity for them to be removed in order to move up this triangle. How do you do that? Well, you bring in the next person. So development and being a good employer is about constantly developing people to create opportunity. What happens a lot in businesses that are under pressure is once I found my employee, that's great, I've got somebody now, I can stop looking. The problem with if you stop looking, it means you're not creating a vacuum for the person who's already in your business to move up through your business. So we need to have our eye on that long-term vision, what we're trying to achieve, and to know who's currently in the system and what their potential is. And that requires a lot of communicating well with the people in your business. Firstly, clearly understanding what your business needs. So clearly articulating what your business needs. And that's going to be the next, we're really going to look at that in the next session. We're going to talk about delivering on promises. So do you know exactly what you're looking for, and are you facilitating that person to do the job that you have hired them to do? So we want to create an opportunity to bring people up through the system. We can only do that if we're looking for people long term. What does that allow you to do? Well, it allows you to move on to the next opportunity also. So if you are absolutely central to your business, the business completely hinges on you, runs on you, then you cannot be away from your business. And in fact, you become toxic to your business because the business is centralized to you. Therefore, the removal of you causes a problem for the business. What does that look like in a toxic business? Working crazy hours, being a slave to your business, never getting away. What does it look like to the people around you? Not that you're a highly capable individual, probably more likely that you're a busy fool. And that's a very difficult pill to swallow when I have to unfortunately say that to people. But it's about stepping back and reflecting on yourself. So it's really important when we look at this slide that you come away from today's talk and think, well, where am I? And am I giving myself the best opportunity to move on to new opportunities? Am I giving my staff the best opportunity to develop into their potential and to create that management focus? So when we change that focus, what we also have is we have a change in complexity. So if you look at this slide here, down here, we're milking cows, we're managing our system. There's low complexity in that in as much as it's a prescribed idea. So people know what time they're going to milk the cows, how to milk the cows, there's a system set in place. That's low complexity. You need to do a lot of that to get a return. So you're milking a huge number of cows to get a return here, a large number of cows, I suppose. So there are very few options around here. You're told what to do and when to do it. As we move up in the business and we move away from task towards vision, so coming back to this triangle, our focus changes from task to vision, we're adding complexity. And the reason we add complexity, if you think of it as simply as this, somebody hands you a menu, a really nice menu of food, and you think, God, I wish somebody would just tell me what to eat. It'd be much easier, because there's a risk that I pick something and regret that I didn't pick something else. So I might have food envy when my partner's dinner comes out while I'm eating my dinner. So it's understanding that as you move towards the business, the risk, there's a higher risk, there's a higher complexity. So you need to have the right people in place to allow you to deal with those high dollar, those high value decisions. So vision has high complexity because the risk of doing the wrong thing is much more dangerous. If I milk a little bit late today, if I make a mistake milking, I can fix it this evening's milking, tomorrow's milking. Whereas if I decide to diversify and go in the wrong way, or to buy land and it's the wrong land, or to change my herd profile and it was the wrong decision, that has a much higher level of risk attached to it. And when we start looking at risk and the understanding of what risk is, we need to understand that you need thinking time to manage risk properly. So as we change in our roles, it becomes less about doing and more about thinking. So hopefully, I can't see with the little icons there around, let's see if I can move those. Oh yeah, okay. So as you can see here, we've got we move away from doing to thinking. So we have a change in mindset and behavior. This is really, really important in management in an agricultural setting. The shift, the mindset from thinking to doing, from doing to thinking is really, really difficult. Why? Because farmers are really good at doing. If you grew up on farm, then you've been farming since you were 2. As soon as you could follow mommy or daddy out the door to help, you've been farming since you were 2. So we have really ingrained behavior of how to do things. Because we know how to do it, and we can do it really quickly and really efficiently often, sometimes we hold on to redundant habits that we could get rid of, but often we're quick at doing it and we feel good about ourselves. So we've got a lot of mindset changing to do. And so this change is very difficult, not just in agriculture actually. If across all sectors, the people who create the business find it really difficult to sustain the business because the thinking and the mindset changes. So the really important thing to remember is that the thinking that created the business will not sustain the business. And for you looking at this graph, looking at this slide is to think about, well, the way I worked before isn't sustainable. So you can't constantly physically throw work. You know, as you get older, you're not as strong and as capable as you were, as difficult as that is to accept. As your scale gets bigger, you cannot be everywhere. So your thinking needs to shift as your business changes. So as your business grows, it requires a different approach, a different mindset. And that mindset is moving away from doing towards thinking. Now, if you want to be good at thinking, you need time and space. And the best way to create time and space for you to work on higher level decision making is to make sure that you are facilitating your staff at all levels of your business to be doing the right thing at the right time. So moving towards that employer of choice status, you are giving yourself huge opportunity to work on those high risk, high complexity, high value decisions because you're not worried about what's going on behind you, what's going on behind the scenes. You know that you have a robust system that has a huge, huge basis allowing you to make those higher level decisions. So coming against this triangular idea, or think of the pyramids in Egypt, they have such a huge base, they're able to reach a very tall height. So it's thinking about what have you put in place here to allow you to do this. And that's about managing people. It's about developing the people within your business. It's about bringing in the right type of person into your business. And that all comes from a huge understanding of what your business needs at any one time. It comes from an understanding of where your business is going. That's vision. It comes from an understanding of what you particularly want from your business. So it could be that you turn around and say, you know what? I love milking my cows. I'm not really into the paperwork. I have a real passion for cows. If I set up my system, I can be the one who does a lot of the milking and I can allow other people to do the other work. That's your decision. So it's really about understanding what it is you want from your business. But critically, what I would say to all of you is don't complain about something you're in a position to change. Do not complain about the thing that you are creating. Step back, reflect on this and ask yourself, well, where am I? Where would I like to be? And what is the gap between where I am and where I should be? And that's the same with any member of staff that you have. If you spot potential here, you know, down here that you believe has the opportunity to be middle management, which is tactical. Tactical is about the distribution of resources. So they're still going to be doing a lot of the technical stuff, but they're also facilitating other people to do that. You need to be thinking about what those people look like, how to develop them, what's the skill set between here and there. So we'd hear a lot of people saying people are coming out of colleges, people are coming out of courses without the skill set they need. That happens across all sectors. All sectors, you know, if you go to university, the speed of information change now is something like if you start off in a 4-year degree, the information you learned in the beginning of your degree is obsolete by the time you get to the end of your degree. So you've got to think that information shifts quite rapidly. Now, luckily in farming, we have a lot of consistency because it's land-based and the land doesn't move. So we need to think about what it is that you need and what are you willing to train on farm and what are you willing to pay for. So if you want a better skill set coming into your business, you have to be prepared to pay for that skill set. If we want dairy industry to be a desirable industry to work in, we need to remunerate appropriately because otherwise you're creating a bad reputation. So it's understanding what you can let go of. Of course, we undervalue the work that we ourselves are particularly good at. So if you don't understand the skill set, you pay a lot more for that skill set because you're paying for something you don't understand. Whereas you might look at somebody and say, well, I could do that in 5 minutes. Why should I pay that person that amount of money? I don't think that it's worth that amount of money. That is a big mindset that needs to change, that we undervalue skills, we undervalue how much we should pay for a skill that we already have. And when we start getting better at valuing the hard work that is required to make this large basis, we start to reevaluate how we think about our staff and how we think about our business and the value that we want to create. So just looking overall at that slide, we need to think that as your business is shifting, as the skill set changes, you need to appropriately facilitate that change in skill set requirement. So we need to think about, yes, this person is good at managing cows, but are they able to manage people? And unfortunately, in my experience, we tend to promote the good herdsman, the good herdswoman, and actually they don't sit well here because they're desperate to get back to their cows. So we find that they're still hankering for the cow job rather than doing the management job, and that can be a little bit of a problem both for them because they're quite miserable because they're not as engaged with their cows as they used to be, and also you start to feel negatively about somebody you placed a huge amount of value in. So you see somebody that down here that you really admire, their ability on the farm, their management of cows, their skill set in the system, and you think, right, they're great, we'll put them up here, we'll make them a unit manager. They'll probably be flattered to take on the opportunity, but what we don't do is facilitate them with the skill set to become that manager. So when you look at the difference between, for example, US companies and European companies, US companies promote a business mindset up to the top of the organization. European companies promote expertise. So if I'm an engineer and I'm brilliant at designing bridges, well, automatically I should be able to manage people. And then I'm not only supposed to be able to manage people, but I'm also supposed to be able to run a business. But that doesn't make sense. So what we see is we see a limit in businesses where there's a misunderstanding of the skill change as you progress through the organization. So for people watching today, you need to understand that the tasks and what makes people good here as a follower or as a first-line employee is not the same skill set that makes them good in a management position. And the day you can understand the gap between here and here, you're going to make much more effective unit managers, business managers, which in turn create a vacuum for you to remove yourself and work on these higher level, high complexity decisions. So reflecting very much on that slide is going to make a big difference to your business. Who are you looking at? Have you misassigned somebody? Have you promoted somebody without facilitating them to be in that role? Or what's the skills gap? So moving on to this, when we look at the dairy system, dairy system is a triadic relationship. So we've got the cows, we've got the system, and we've got people. We do a lot more cows and system at the lower level of the triangle. So if we went back up to the previous slide, this is what's happening at the lower level of the triangle. As we move through the organization, as your business gets bigger and you start looking at multi-unit operation, you are beginning to facilitate people more, and it becomes skewed. So this part of the pie, this part of the relationship becomes much more important. So let's assume that you're very good at cows and system. When you move into a management position, there's a shift away from technical skill towards people skills. And that's what I'm talking about today. So that people skills, we now have a shift. And if we move that forward, we see that in fact, business now is only 1/3 of the pie, and personal and interpersonal skills are 2/3 of the pie. So the pie has actually shifted. We're assuming there's a huge amount of robust business understanding. Now we need to develop management skill set. And management is about understanding yourself, what skills gap do you have to facilitate other people, and what interpersonal skills are required to make your system work as a whole. So it's really important that you understand when you're moving somebody into, when you're developing management, when you're being an employer, you need to think about where your focus is and what you're working on. We're very good at developing the business part because we know a lot about the skills required. This is less comfortable. And I would get a lot of kickback from farmers saying, but I love my cows, it's a shame I have to have people there. That's fine if you want to be a lone operator at a certain scale. But when you want to introduce other people into your system, when you want to create a system that's attractive enough for your family to progress into, when you want to create an opportunity to remove yourself so you can pursue other adventures, then it's really important that you are facilitating people. So as we move through the organization, as you move through your own personal role in farming, you need to see that there's a shift away from doing towards people, towards thinking. And the better you are at facilitating people, the more time you have for thinking for those higher complex, those more complex decisions. So hopefully you can see that there's quite a strong shift, and we need to think about that in terms of the triangle. When you're looking for your unit managers, when you're trying to develop somebody internally, be confident in their business skill set, be confident in their understanding of cows, in their understanding of the system, in bookkeeping, and all of those things that run a business. But understand that there's a new shift in that role, and it's towards personal and interpersonal. So what are the kind of skills we need to think about for personal skills? Well, personal skills is about creating capacity.
Nollaig, could I ask a question?
Yeah.
If we think about it from a perspective of an employee in a business that is on their way up to management, we've spoken a lot about owners and operators, but what about those that are underneath those? How would you suggest they approach those above them to consider what you're talking about? Okay,
so if we just go back up to that one. So we've got somebody working, so Bernie's question, I've got somebody working here who maybe has an eye on moving up towards it or sees potential there. That's about, it's always sensitive, isn't it? Because if I'm down here, I don't want to look like the upstart and pushy and moving forward. For anybody out there who's in an employment position and has aspirations to move towards the organization, make sure you nail it down here. So learn as much as you can here, because it's not like you lose that, it's not like those skills become redundant. When you move up to this section here and you're moving into management, you still have huge oversight of this. You need to make sure it's being done and done well. So it's critical that you are really investing and learning everything you can, because you will take that skill set forward. Now, I suppose Bernie preempted me a little bit there, that the next slide is how do I create personal capacity? And this is about for employees who want to move up. It's also for employers who want to shift their role, but for employees who want to move up, personal capacity is really important. And personal capacity starts off with self-awareness. So if we went back to those triangles, what am I good at and what do I need to be better at? Reflecting on the unit managers already in the system, or unit managers that I know from other businesses who I like, who I aspire to, business owners who I aspire to be. What do they look like, and what gaps, where's the skills gap for me? So if I know I'm good at something, what am I not good at? And that's about self-awareness. Farming actually lends itself to a lot of reflection. And I'm not talking about, freaking yourself out from a psychology point of view and being so self-critical or so self-aware that you're afraid to get out of bed in the morning in case you offend somebody. I'm talking about just understanding, where are my gaps? And in psychology, we try not to call them weaknesses. We call them areas for development. So you're looking for areas of development that will help you to move to the next step. So you might be saying to yourself, look, I'm good at cows, I'm good at system, but I'm really not comfortable with the books, with the numbers, with the number crunching side of things. I have a lack there. And that's a significant part of the role as I move forward. How can I invest in myself? So self-awareness is really, really important. How do you get that? Well, first, it's great. Looking for feedback is fantastic. Feedback is a little bit dangerous because you may not be receptive to that information. So a couple of tips when you're looking for feedback on to get a better awareness of yourself would be asking the right person. The right person isn't somebody who is going to tell you everything they want to hear because they want to impress you. Also, it's not the person who's going to go into a personal assassination and destroy you. It's somebody who's genuinely interested in your development, who's genuinely interested in seeing you develop yourself. It could be, taking on a mentor, somebody who says, this is where you are, this is where you need to be. In my experience, this is how you move forward. This is what I found useful. So we would see with some of the more progressive businesses, they would have a good kind of buddying or mentor scheme. There's no reason why that can't happen in farming, so that you're aligning yourself with somebody that you admire. It could be just reading their blogs on the internet. It could be just following them on Twitter, whatever it is. It's something that allows you to get an insight into the type of person you would like to be. So creating that self-awareness. That self-investment then is critical. look, I would always side with, I nearly always side with the employee. I apologize to employers for that, but I specialize in leadership, and leadership is, leadership is really, it's a privilege. So being in a position of leadership is a privilege. And so we need to be mindful, if you're the farmer, if you're the farm owner, you have a huge asset that is there, that is available to you. You have the privilege. And so there's an expectation because of that, that the employee is expecting to be invested in. But if you're a progressive individual as an employee and you self-invest, that is greatly, greatly admired. That shows that you are willing, that shows that you want, that shows that you are also worth investing in. So by investing in yourself, you show that you're worth investing in. So for the business owner, they see somebody who is, developing themselves, who's a self-starter, we would say, so somebody who's getting on with it and trying to make themselves better in order to contribute to the workplace. Well, I'm going to invest in that person because I know I'll get a return for my investment. So self-investment is really important. And that comes back to that previous one, self-aware. If I know that I have a gap between where I am and where I want to be, I would invest in that gap. And it could be going to your employer and saying, I've been keeping an eye on Dairy Australia's courses, or, I know that this course is coming up. I'd really like to attend it. The business owner might go, oh yeah, why? You need to be able to articulate why. Because I'm going to learn this. I believe this is going to help me in my role. I believe this is good for the business. That's a nice conversation that no employer is going to turn away. Okay. Again, that's timing. So you're not going to say that to them in the middle of, they're having a screaming argument with their bank manager. You don't tap them on the shoulder and say, can I take the day off tomorrow because I want to go and invest in myself. It's really about influencing upwards, picking your moment so that your boss hears what you're saying, so that your employer hears what you're trying to do, rather than it being an aside and the day you're missing, they're kind of going, well, where is this guy? He said he'd be here. He's not here. What's going on? They've forgotten that you've said you're self-investing. So it's very important that we look at communication and timing, which we will look at during the course of these sessions. So self-investment, don't wait for other people to spot your ability. Don't wait for other people to see that you are worth investing in. Show them that you're worth investing in. Influence upwards and show people what you're looking for. If you think of people, if you look at those triangles again, and you're an employee in somebody's business, they might even be sitting beside you right now watching this with you. If you look at those triangles and you realize that the higher up the organization, the more complex the decisions are, well, everybody has a lot on their mind. So the best thing to be is somebody who removes problems and creates solutions. The best thing to be is to influence upwards so that everybody thinks it's a win-win and that you're not just asking and taking. It's about relieving burden for somebody. So from there, we look at a really critical one of effective time management. I'm grateful to Bernie for asking me to speak about time management last month. It's a really, really important aspect because your personal capacity really is your ability to get things done is all based on time. Everything is based on time. Can you get it done? Can you get it done in a timely fashion? Showing people that you value your time and you're not wasting your time. That speaks really well to when you're influencing upwards. For as an employer, managing your staff's time, not having them idle, not having them hanging around looking for work to do, but actually mapping that out so that time is well spent. When we have an employee, we are at its most basic, buying time. We're adding time into our planner. Equally for the employee, using the boss's time effectively. They've paid you for an amount of time, being good at fulfilling that time, respecting your own time, so coming in on time, but leaving on time. And having the ability to say no, that's really, really important, because on farm, what's the worst thing will happen? Will anybody die or will you lose millions? Very rarely can you answer yes to either of those questions. So the ability to get your work done on time, to leave on time, and to show that you are organized. If you allow time to have spongy borders, well, that creates an expectation. And then the day that you want to leave on time, maybe you're causing some resentment because you haven't done that before, though you're actually completely entitled to do that. I know in Australia, you've got more stringent employment law, which is great. So we need to understand effective time management, using your time effectively. So not just learning the job, but learning the job well. And when somebody comes to show you how to do the job and they're an expert at what they're doing, ask questions. Ask them how to do it. What have they learned? How do they learn to do it that well? Where does the thinking come from? Ask questions so that you are getting better value for your time. And that's come straight back into self-investment, and it's going to feed into that self-awareness. Well, gosh, I would never have, how is it that that person came up with that idea? I would never think like that. What's the difference between their thinking and my thinking, and can we have a conversation around it? Then we have this is a tricky one, striving for obsolescence. The ultimate in leadership is to become obsolete. Now, I don't mean obsolete in the sense that you're no good, you're redundant, and you create no value. That is not at all what I mean. What I mean here by striving for obsolescence is creating a system that can function without you. Now, that's a mindset change, because a system that can function without you would suggest that you shouldn't be in the system. But that's not what I mean at all. What I mean is that the system isn't centralized so much to you that by removing yourself, you're damaging the system. What does that look like as an employee? Being indispensable makes you unpromotable. If you are absolutely, completely and utterly brilliant to the point of everything centralizing to you in a certain level in a business, you cannot be promoted. Because if I remove you, I run the risk of collapsing that level of the business. So what you have to do is you have to create a vacuum. You've got to create the opportunity for you to move up. As business owners, you've got to create the opportunity for you to remove yourself from the business to be able to work on the business, or to get new opportunities such as expansion or diversification. So striving for obsolescence is the ability not to be central to your role, because you're creating other paths for that role to be fulfilled. So if you're an employee that has aspirations towards being a unit manager or moving up in the system, you need to be developing other staff alongside with you to create a vacuum for you. You need to be generous with your information and your skill set. Now, that is a change in mindset. What if the other person's better than me? What if the employer thinks they're the ones who I should promote? You know, we have to let go of some of our paranoia about developing other people, because if we don't develop other people, we don't give ourselves the opportunity to progress. And that's the same in the family. If you're not developing your relationship with your sons and daughters, you're not creating an opportunity for them to come into the business with you. So striving for obsolescence is really about creating a vacuum that allows you to move on in the business. And you can only do that if you're sharing your skill set with other people. And that's a really difficult one, because there's a huge, as humans, we want a sense of belonging. So to say that you're going to make yourself obsolete is suggesting to yourself that you don't need to belong, and that's quite difficult to get your head around. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about creating a vacuum that allows you to pursue other opportunities. And you can do that through effective time management, through self-investment, and your self-awareness. Along with that, we need a lot of mental toughness and positive mindset. So as you move through any organization, as your business gets bigger, you come across bigger obstacles, you come across bigger challenges. The challenge of the cow kicking in the parlor, that's a simple challenge when you're working at the front line of the business. But when you move up and you start finding out that there's a big issue with cow health, for example, that's a much bigger challenge, a much bigger threat. So we see a change in threat and a change in the mindset required to focus on that. So, you know, as we move through, we have a comparison bias where you go, God, I long for the days when I had a kicking cow. Here I am now trying to work out my bank balance. So we have that comparison bias, but at the time the cow was kicking you, that was the worst thing in the world. So mental toughness and a positive mindset is critical. Unfortunately, when we look at resilience, when we look at mental toughness, you can break anybody. So this is something we constantly need to be aware of. It feeds straight back into that self-awareness concept. Do you understand what stresses you? Do you understand who stresses you? Do you understand how to negate that stress or how to manage that stress? That positive mindset is critical. What we find with resilient people is that they're far more likely to see something as a challenge rather than a threat. So when they meet a blockage, they say, this is a challenge, this is a learning opportunity for me to improve my business. Somebody who has lower levels of mental toughness, and I don't mean they're mentally weak, it's a continuum, so it's not bipolar. Somebody who is vulnerable at a particular time is going to see everything as a threat. The smallest thing in the world is going to be it's going to be a mountain. So the molehill will turn into the mountain if you're stressed, if you're under pressure. So that mental toughness and that positive mindset is really, really important. We know from sport that you can develop that skill set. A huge aspect of developing mental toughness and a positive mindset is actually effective time management. So if I was dealing, and I'm a psychologist, if I was dealing with somebody who was struggling, who had low levels of mental toughness, who was struggling with their resilience, one of the first interventions would be to manage their time better. Because you're managing their time better, they get a sense of achievement because they're getting through things. So mental toughness, it's all linked in together. Mental toughness also in a positive mindset is allowing you to strive for obsolescence because you are in a position to take on those challenges and to move forward. You're not overwhelmed by the role you're in because you've centralized everything to yourself. So that mental toughness and positive mindset is really, really important. And really importantly, this social support network. So when we look at resilient or mentally tough people, they've got two very specific things that are common to all of them. They have a great social support network and they have very good perspective. And perspective comes from being able to compare between scenarios. So understanding that this is bad, but it's not as bad as it could be. It might be Australian dairy farmers going, yes, COVID-19 was a frustration, but in comparison to drought, in comparison to volatility of milk price, in comparison to flooding, in comparison to fire, actually COVID isn't a huge threat to us. That's perspective. So it's thinking about what your perspective is, creates mental toughness, and also that social support network. When we invest in ourselves, when we develop ourselves, we are showing that we value ourselves as individuals. We are showing our employers that we are worth investing in. Our employers look at us and go, that's somebody who could be a real strength in my business, who could be a stalwart in my business, and I'm going to invest in them as well. So that personal capacity is critical. And there is a feeling in employment, there's a feeling in employers that there aren't good employees out there. That's rubbish. You only get good employees if you're a good employer. Equally, there's a feeling with employees that employers should be making all the effort to work on them because they have the privilege of being the employer. If we get to a scenario, if we get to a business where we're looking for win-win scenarios, I as an employee want to make myself a better employee. I as an employer want to make myself a better employer. That's a win-win scenario. That's a really robust business. And that comes down to very clearly understanding the triangles on that first slide, understanding role clarity, what can I contribute, what's my skills gap? As an employer, what am I facilitating? What am I not facilitating? And could I be better at that? So that personal capacity is really, really important. Totally controllable, by the way. We cannot control a single other person. We can only control ourselves. We can only control our reaction to other people. So for everybody out there, whether you're an employee wanting to move forward in the business, you're an employer wanting to make a better business, this is all controllable because you have the power to invest in all of those ideas. Really, really important to understand that. When we look at highly effective leadership, leadership always looks at itself first and then at others. When we look at people who misunderstand the concept of leadership or management, they tend to focus outwards and forget that they are the single biggest influence in their own environment. So when I understand myself first, what is it about me that creates that disruption? What is it about me that's not so? Say, for example, Kylie Boston works for me and she's not doing her job properly. What was it about me as her manager that prevented her from doing her job as well as possible? And so I'm looking at myself first, that's that feedback loop. As an employee, I didn't get that promotion. Kylie got that promotion over me. What was it about me that prevented me moving forward? And rather than sitting back and maybe sulking about it as an employee, investigating, finding out the skills gap between you and the next person, asking your employer, I was really interested in that job, could you give me some feedback on why I didn't get it? Timing is everything. Make sure that you're fed waters and have had a snooze, because when you're tired, you're far more vulnerable. When you're hungry, you're far more vulnerable, and you will take that information personally. You will take it emotionally rather than logically. Be careful about, as I said earlier, be careful who you speak to. Make sure that you're getting the right, you're speaking to the right person. If you want to know why you didn't get promoted, don't go around the houses trying to find out who what was said about you. Go straight to the direct source and find out what should I have done to get that promotion. Looking then at interpersonal skills, and I'm just going to briefly reference these because this is really what being an employer of choice is going to be, and this is where these talks are going to move towards. So interpersonal skills, we've mentioned a lot of that today. As an employee, you need to be able to influence upwards. You need to be able to influence your employer. You need to be able to get what you need to be a better employee from your employer. So that's about influencing upwards. This is interpersonal skills. You need to be able to get along with other employees. You need to be able to bring out the best in other employees. by showing that you are a good person to work with, that you have the respect and loyalty of your employees. That's, sings so much towards, says so much about you to your employee without you ever having to state it. We also have a look at teams. So again, this comes from the employer as well. The employer needs to be able to manage employees. We could get on very well with individuals. This is quite common, by the way. You can get on very well with individuals, but not be able to harness what we call the synergy of a team. So the combined effort of the team, that's a different skill set again. Knowing when to use teams. Teams are a very specific concept that it's misused. What we have in most workplaces is something that's called coaction teams, which is everybody is doing their own thing and that contributes towards the end goal. So for example, a rifle team, they all shoot individually and it's the combined score that wins the cup, as opposed to something like Aussie rules, which is an interdependent sport and you really rely on them. That's quite unique. You don't see that much in the workplace. So when to use teams, when to focus on a team, and when to say, no, we don't need a specific team here to do that. And then stakeholders are critical. So another thing when we look at management development, we're moving away from just being in the business when we're doing management development, and we're working better with stakeholders. So, creating relationships as a unit manager, you need to be engaging with your neighbors, with your vet, with your bank manager. There's lots of people involved as you move through. That team becomes quite big. So we will look at a lot of those concepts as we move forward on the webinar sessions. How do you influence your employees? So today, I've thrown quite a bit of information at you, but what would be really valuable for everybody walking away today is to really sit and reflect on this idea of your changing role and the role of the people currently in your business. The better you are at articulating the role for the people in your business, the easier it is to attract the right person to the business. And when I say easier, that could take quite a long time, but you're getting the right person in. And every time you get the right person into your business, you are going to attract more of the right type of people because you're creating a value system in your business that other people will recognize and want to be a part of. As we move on to management skills, you want to think about, yes, of course, somebody has a lot of the skill set in dairy, so the system and the cows, but the focus now shifts as you're developing management and employers. You're developing into that idea of people. That people aspect now becomes 2/3 of the pie, not just 1/3 of the pie, as you shift into that management role. For employees and employers themselves who want to create progression and succession, building personal capacity, something you can absolutely control. Do not wait for somebody to see, don't hide your light under a bushel, cut away the bushel and let everybody see how capable you are. Of course, that's about being politically correct and not stepping on the wrong toes and offending people, but it's really about stepping back and self-awareness and investing on being a better person, a better employee. And then we've got those interpersonal skills that are going to make you an employer of choice. So as we move forward, it's going to be a much bigger dwelling on this idea of interpersonal skills, because as an employer, you are facilitating people to be better employees. As a unit manager, you are facilitating your employees to be better and you're influencing upwards to your employer. So this interpersonal skills is where we're going to move towards. We have the next session is on, I had it written down somewhere, Barney will tell us, I'm sure, in July. That's going to be looking at delivering. It's going to be the first of the employer of choice, and I will refer back to these. So please, coming away from today, reflect on your own role and where your business is going, what you want from your business, how you see your business progressing, and that's going to create the foundation for being an employer of choice. Your clear understanding of your business and the people within it is the foundation for really moving your business forward significantly. So that's my session for today. Please, if you have any questions, I'm sure Barney will throw me a challenging one there. Hopefully that was quite clear to what I was trying to explain. I will provide a fact sheet just to follow up on some of the topics today. And as it's recorded, you'll be in a position to go back over some of those ideas. Thank you. Excellent.
Thanks very much, Nollaig. I really appreciate your time and covering such a big topic. I know you could talk for another hour on that. Look, are there any questions at all from everybody? If you want to type at the bottom, or you can take yourself off mute and ask any questions of Nollaig. How do you keep the old hand out of this space? So how do you manage that senior person or the owner in the business, whom others maybe, I'm trying to read this into the question, whom others maybe can see that if they could step back, it would help everybody?
Yeah, it really comes back to, funny thing really, as a consultant, when somebody says the family-run business, my instinct is to run a mile, because that's so fraught with relationship issues. But it really comes back to the invading party. And the invading party is the next generation. And it's about being sensitive to the fact, and I mentioned it earlier about striving for obsolescence. In farming, we have people, as I said, who've been farming since they were 2. So you're looking at people who you would like to exit coming into their 60s, and they're still hanging in there in their mid-70s and their 80s. It's being sensitive to the fact that who wants to be removed and told you're no good any longer? I mean, nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants that feeling. And so when you get somebody who is clinging on for dear life and maybe becoming a bit of a control freak, we think that the control freak is very in control. The control freak is very out of control and feeling very threatened. And so it's about being mindful of the huge body of knowledge that is in somebody who is maybe elderly in your business, and respecting that and asking their opinion. And often the asking of the opinion has as much value as acting on the opinion. The belief that I'm being listened to makes me feel some way in control, makes me feel some way part of the system. And so when you look at really good systems where you have a father-child, mother-child, parent-child relationship working really well in the farm, it's because thankfully the next generation, the children, have utter respect for what it is that their parents have achieved. It is that the employee has utter respect for what the employer has achieved and isn't in their face saying, but we could do it better and I don't see why you're doing it that way and I've got much better ideas than you. It's actually saying, it's acknowledging what was done well and then working and building on that. And when the employer or the elder statesman says, no, that won't work, rather than saying, well, that's a blockage and I'm going to fight you, saying, why? Why won't it work? And it could easily be that they're totally right, that person is totally right. And by taking the time to say why, and then when they say it won't work because of X, if you're looking at influencing upwards and that person still has control over the money, for example, you should be anticipating every reason they say why, they say no. And you should be anticipating in a way that you're able to offset them so that you give them, you give them no opportunity to say no because you're satisfying every one of their questions or their fears. But, really about valuing, I was doing some talks in Ireland in the end of 2019, and we had a guy talking about health and safety, and he made such a really nice statement. He said, if you're fortunate enough to still have members of your family working with you, maybe having an elderly dad still working with you. And he said, if you're fortunate enough, that's a totally different mindset to, oh, will I ever get rid of my parents out of the business? Will I ever get rid of the employer out of the business? And that's a totally different way of looking at it, because the day you value somebody, and this comes particularly for employers, the day you value your employees as assets, so children, the day you value your parents as assets, you are going to have a much stronger relationship. You're going to have far less blockages, and you are going to be able to work better with that person. But plus, by the way, you feel good about yourself because you haven't railroaded somebody. And, when it comes to your time, you'd be delighted that somebody took your opinion, and you'd be grateful that you engaged with your parents or your manager, or whoever it is. Understand that people in the business who are moving out of the business, that's a big threat, and that's very, very scary. And they're standing at a gulf. If you're a young person moving into a business, you've got the world ahead of you. You feel great. You've got a long time there. If you're retiring out of a business, if you're moving on to a different role, there's a huge gulf in front of you, and that's terrifying. So being sensitive to understand the gulf, holding hands a little bit, and understanding that I'd feel threatened too. So that self-awareness, I spoke about leadership having a strong aspect of self-awareness. If I understand what I feel threatened by, then I'm in a position to work better with others because I can see where they're coming from. You got another question?
I do have another question. Can you talk a little bit about encouraging employees to fill that vacuum you're creating for them? They have the capability, but maybe not the confidence.
Okay, great question. And I will actually answer that with a very specific model as we move through investing in your staff. That's really about allowing people to fail safely. It's showing them that you have confidence in them without overwhelming. So you might see somebody has a huge amount of talent and you say, right, run my business. I'm going to Ireland to a dairy conference and I'm going to be there for 2 weeks. Here's the business. That is terrifying. That will paralyze a person into inaction. So we need to allow somebody to fail safely. So how do we do it? Okay, I'm working again with Kylie, and I might say to Kylie, I know you're capable of doing this. I'm going to a discussion meeting tomorrow. I'm going to be gone for 2 hours in the morning. This is what you can expect is going to happen. And we facilitate that person to feel comfortable in that space. And we allow them to fail safely. What's the worst that could happen in 2 hours? I'm a phone call away. I can get back straight away. Don't panic. But I know you're good enough to do this. I know you won't call me. As opposed to saying, you're in charge of my entire unit. I'm not going to facilitate you with the skill set, but I will slaughter you if you get it wrong. And that's what happens an awful lot. So it's allowing people, it's showing people you have confidence in them in a space where they don't feel overwhelmed. They feel grateful for the respect you've shown to them. They feel grateful that you're investing in them, but they're not absolutely terrified. And what happens a lot is we promote somebody inappropriately, and then we slaughter them for doing it wrong. And that person is going to retract into a very, very tight shell. They're going to start becoming that control freak and centralizing everything to themselves because they don't want to be slaughtered again. So allowing somebody to develop has to be done safely. It's giving them time. But I will actually give you a pretty fail-safe model on how you develop somebody through those stages. When somebody's, somebody doesn't know what they're doing, somebody's lacking confidence, how can you bring them onto that place where they're feeling good about themselves? And I will discuss that very, very specifically.
Great answer. And that was from Richard down in Tassie, so he did...
Thanks, Richard.
He didn't let me down.
Good.
Are there any other questions? I don't have any other written questions.
Yeah, you do actually, Bernie. There's one just before that, but that's all right. Nollaig, it was, how do you manage the issue? It's a good question. The issue that you want to know everything going on, and how do you get people to let go?
Brilliant question. Okay, so how do you manage? Okay, how do you manage the issue that you want to know everything that's going on, and how do you get people to let go? Again, we're talking about getting people to let go. That comes back to failing safely. So allowing people, so we first of all, very, very clear about what the roles are and the requirements are in the business. Now, when we promote somebody inappropriately, they still have a hankering for their previous role, and they still want to be, they feel more comfortable in that previous role because they know more about it. So they can quite often want to still be involved. And you would see it is so typical in businesses where the founder is still there. So we will see managing directors of large companies still insisting on choosing the color of the dustbin for the back closet. Okay, so really stupid stuff that they're looking at $1 decisions when they should be working on their $1,000 and $10,000 decision making. And it's really about the ability to come back to those triangles and reflect and say to yourself, do I really need to be making this decision? Am I paying somebody else in the business to make it? Remember, if you're the employer, particularly if you're the business owner and employer, you are a very highly paid, you're the most expensive person in your business. So you should be doing the work that is appropriate to your fee. And if there's somebody there that you've paid to milk the cows, but you're milking the cows, you've paid 2 people to milk the cows, including the most expensive person. So it's really about understanding tolerances. If you say to yourself, well, hang on a minute, I'm the owner of the business, I'm the employer, I am entitled to some of the perks, and I love milking the cows, fine. But remember that if you're milking the cows, it's an opportunity cost. What are you not doing? And have you allowed somebody else to do that? And equally for your employees, if they're doing things that is no longer part of their role or they shouldn't be doing, stop them. So when we look at I think it's the session after the next session, we're going to look at accountability, making sure people are doing what they're supposed to do. Stop them. If they're doing something that's not in their role, if they're holding on to something that they shouldn't be holding on to, stop them. Don't stop them 10 months down the line, even though you know they've been doing it for 10 months. Stop straight away. And so when we look at people management and developing a business, there's a huge amount of monitoring and observation that goes on. And that really hurts employers to hear that, because that's policing and they don't want to do it. You have to police hard in the beginning. It is short-term pain for long-term gain. You have to do a lot of policing to set standards in the beginning. When you move somebody into the new role, they need to know that you are still minding them and that you're not setting them up to fail, that you're not going to let them flounder, that you still have oversight of what they're doing. And that, again, will come back to that model that I discussed about developing people into a role. So it's really important that you understand what is required of each role and clarify that from the very beginning. clarified, because you're moving into a management role, you will no longer be, you will be setting the rotas for milking, you won't be milking. If you are milking, it might happen once a month. I shouldn't see you doing any more than that. So it's not just about, when we're looking at job descriptions, it's not just about what they're supposed to do, it's also what they shouldn't be doing.
And our last question, what suggestions would you have to get staff on board that resist change? Change being owners learning and moving further up the triangle, focusing on working more on the business to better the business as a whole, and then getting them on board to share and be involved in the vision.
Okay, well, there's a very simple one. Don't use the word change. Change management is a fear industry, which I make a good living out of. So look, the minute we come in and we say there's going to be change, there isn't real change. If we look at somebody like Henry Mintzberg, who's a management guru, we haven't changed. You know, we still use wheels, we still use fire, you're still extracting milk from a cow. You mightn't be on a three-legged stool, you might have a very advanced machine, but you're still milking a cow. So really change is incremental. In first world, in the first world, change is incremental. It shouldn't be dramatic. There's something seriously wrong with your system if you're doing dramatic change. So when you want to bring somebody on board, it's not going in and going, right, there's going to be lots of changes around here. That straight away is like a line, that's my limbic system, that's my prehistoric brain that's saying, oh my God, there's a lion coming into my cave about to kill me. So my reaction is, I'm either going to fight, or I'm going to flight, or I'm just going to be paralyzed. So it's really important that you're managing people. Some people love it. Some people are change junkies, and unless, you know, and farming is difficult for them because farming is actually quite predictable. So the change junkie may not stay well in your business. They may be quite disruptive. So for people who don't like change, it's how you sell that idea to them. And it's really about starting off and saying, this is what we're doing well. If we do little adjustments here and there, we can do better. And if you're progressing your business, you know, first of all, if you wanted to introduce a change, timing is everything. You know, are you tapping them on the shoulder in the milking parlour and screaming over the machine, the noise of the machine, by the way, there are going to be lots of changes. You know, it's sitting somebody down and getting them ready for that, and explaining to them. And we all operate from a position of WIIFM. What's in it for me? So I'm, as an employee, and you're saying this is going to be great for the business, all I'm hearing is, I can line my pockets more, I'm going to have more, you know, there's going to be more cash in the system. I'm probably hearing, yeah, but what does it mean for me? Are you going to sweat me harder? Or am I going to be doing more work for less money? You know, I'm going to hear a lot of negative stuff if it's not sold to me properly. So it's about selling the idea that everybody gains, but not being like, you know, humans are very intelligent. So it's not going, it's going to be really good for you. And I'm thinking, really, I'm going to have to work harder. That's good for me. It's really about creating that win-win scenario. What opportunity will it create? And very clearly articulating what pain it's going to cause to create the opportunity. Does it mean I have to come in earlier? Does it mean I have to work harder? Does it mean I'm going to be working with new staff? If I have to work with new staff, what's the threat to me? What does it mean to my, do I still get, you know, you hear some really, really good stories. I was speaking to some farmers in England, and they changed the work hours, thinking in the winter, letting the employees home a little bit earlier. And the employees were really disgruntled because, and this is just mind-boggling, because by going home an hour earlier, they missed the hot potato van on the way home. So they couldn't buy they wanted to stop off and get a jack of potato with fillings on the way home. And because they were let off an hour earlier, they had to go back to go to the potato van, and that really frustrated them. So they were happier to work the extra hour. They're still getting paid. They were still being paid to work till the 5 o'clock, even though they were being let go at 4 o'clock, but they didn't like it because it interfered with something really small and simple. That as an employer is mind-boggling, but people are different, and people have different objectives and motivations and ambitions. And unless you sit down and understand your staff, and unless you sit down and understand why would anybody fear this change, one of the most famous examples of change resistance actually comes from agriculture. And it was a study done in the 1940s by Gross and Ryan in the US. And it was about the uptake of disease-resistant crop seed. So if you're a farmer, you can imagine disease-resistant crop is it's bound to be a good idea, isn't it? You're going to have less hassle with it. You're going to get more money, et cetera, et cetera. And it gave rise to these famous expressions of innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards that we would see a lot in the diffusion of innovation. So, and that's actually from agriculture. So something that is just glaringly obvious to you, that it's a great opportunity, it's brilliant, it's fantastic, the next person won't necessarily take it on. It's up to you to sell that idea. And that's why you need your staff to be doing what they should be doing to allow you thinking time and space to come up with the good arguments to help your staff invest in what you're trying to do. And that's why that idea of creating space for yourself at the top of an organization for thinking is really, really critical.